everybody, look down below. See the red subscribe? Go ahead and click it. Thank you.
Welcome to Forensic Friday. We are now on our second episode, and today we will be talking about a two-part series. We're excited about this one called Exposed, and today will be the criminal side of online technology. So I would like to welcome my co-host, Bertha Hurtado. She is a forensic anthropologist as well as a crime scene investigator, and my other co-host is Harlot Lacow, and she is a professor as well as a forensic scientist. And due to his role in being undercover, the guest that we have today is being concealed by his logo. So the detective today, we are very, very thankful to have you on Forensic Friday. And so you all are aware of the detective's credentials. They're pretty good. He has spent 12 years assigned to the Detective Bureau, 22 years as a police officer, the last 10 years with the Special Victim Units on the South Florida Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, where he handles the crimes against children on the internet and human trafficking. Also handles the police department's digital forensics. As well, he in 2014 joined the FBI's Crime Against Children Task Force and is also deputized as a task force officer with the FBI. Did you get all that? So this gentleman, this detective, is very, very qualified to speak what we are speaking of today. So everybody, welcome to Forensic Friday.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. So detective, you have quite an extensive background, and to be involved in all of this, obviously, it looks to me like you are really for protecting children and the atrocities that actually happen to them. So why don't you tell us what you currently do and why you chose this?
So I handle internet crimes against children and human trafficking for the police department and also for the FBI here down in the Miami office. Basically, the task force was started many years ago to help combat crimes against children on the internet when we had predators and, you know, pedophiles that were going after kids. So the task force was started as a kind of a big organization to help each other out when it came to that. So we're all pretty much trained similarly. And these crimes don't occur like in one jurisdiction. So it may start in my jurisdiction and I may have a suspect in California. And so just to pick up a phone and be able to call the internet crimes detective out there and know that they're pretty much trained similarly to the way we are here, I can just give them the information and they would, for the most part, know what to do with it. So it makes it a little easier to try to combat these crimes. They are, as technology advances, so do the bad guys. So they do get a little harder as the years go on. Technology keeps advancing, and so do the bad guys because they don't want to get caught. So that's a little bit. And the main thing is to protect the victims, which are children. You know, they're the most vulnerable, and you know, give them a voice to make sure that they are protected on whatever they're doing, whether it's on the internet or in person. As far as why I chose this, kind of a funny story. So when I started in Special Victims Unit in 2012, I was the low man on the totem pole, and the department hadn't really been doing these types of investigations as in depth as we are now. And my sergeant at the time kind of tells the story of that I drew the short end of the stick and was said, "Here you go, it's yours, figure it out." So I did, and thankfully I believe to be pretty successful in it, and moving forward with these cases. So I can't stand what I have to look at. I don't like that part of the job. The part that I think is what keeps me going and enjoyable, besides helping the victims, is trying to find that guy hiding behind a computer, hiding behind an IP address or something. That's like the puzzle that keeps going. So that's what helps keep going when you have to look and see all the bad things that you have with this job.
Well, Detective, I just speaking for myself and the world, we are so thankful and fortunate to have people like you and detectives around the world all engaged and trained and working together to try to combat these monsters that are out there. And these children have some protection, people trying to help them. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Any little bit to help, when we first spoke, you said even if one podcast helps one child or one call gets turned in that leads to saving a child or apprehending the bad guy, it's worth it. And I agree with you. This feels worth it to me. And even though the topic may not be something that we all want to discuss, I feel like it has to be discussed because it does exist and there are victims out there. So we're going to go into, one of the things that you specialize in is the internet safety. And I know you have, it's not just for kids, it's for adults too, but you're here, your main role is protecting the children out there. So you've got quite an extensive list on ways to, prevention for internet safety. Why don't you discuss those with our viewers?
Yeah, so we encourage parents to take an active role in their child's digital footprint out there. Most kids, and it gets younger and younger every year. It used to be the kids in high school had phones, then it became the kids in middle school had phones, and now I think the kindergartners are walking in with phones now. So it seems that everybody is getting a mobile device of some type, and they're on it constantly. So what we try to stress to the parents is that device there should be an understanding that the device belongs to the parent, not the child.
Sorry for interrupting. Do you get a lot of backlash on that? Parents not wanting to, snoop or be offensive to their child?
Not so much from the parents, more from the child. It's more of that's mine and it's my privacy. And the parents have to understand that for their safety, for the child's safety, that there's nothing private. There shouldn't be a reason why, and I do this as a test to when I do parent presentations with the kids, is if the kids are in the room with the parents, I start off by having the kids unlock the phone and hand it over to the parent. And I just watch how most of them turn pale and or say no, or they start squirming in their seats. And it's like, why? There shouldn't be anything on the device that the parent shouldn't be able to see. So, and if there is, or there's a red flag like that, then that's the red flag that comes in and says, hey, I need to look at the device. Why is it that they don't want to hand it over to me? And I can understand not handing it over to me being a cop or a police officer. I understand that. But you should, as a child, be able to just hand the device over to the parent without them worrying about what's in it. So biggest thing is that I find that parents nowadays allow the kids to have the devices in their rooms constantly. Like for example, they'll use it as an alarm clock. And that device is going off 24/7, 7 days a week. So at 2:30 in the morning, when the kids should be sleeping, getting ready for school the next morning, they're listening to the bzz, bzz, the vibration on the table in their room because it's going off. They're getting up, they're communicating with somebody in the middle of the night, and that's not necessary. On Walmart, Target, all of your local retailers sell alarm clocks pretty inexpensively. So that shouldn't be an issue. And the device should at night should not be in the room for them to have that opportunity. Because while you're sleeping as a parent, they're communicating with the bad guy, or the bad guy's trying to communicate with them, and you don't know what's going on. One of the things we recommend is that there's a central location out, dining room, living room, kitchen, somewhere like that, where set up a charging station, and at night they put the devices on airplane mode, and they put them in there. Sorry about that. And they put them in there, and they charge overnight while they're sleeping. And then this way, there's no worry about it. The best thing would be is if you set that up, they go to sleep, and while they're sleeping, you are going through their phone to make sure that they're safe. And that's the thing that has to be explained to them is you as the parent are going through their devices to make sure that they are safe. You're not going through it to find the stupid memes between them and their friends or anything along those lines. You're looking to make sure that the bad guy is not communicating with them or they're not being forced to do something that they don't want to do. So,
Detective, I want to just interrupt you for just one moment. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being here with us. And then the question I do have is, why do you think the trend of allowing children at younger ages has become more, I guess, more accessible to kids that are in kindergarten? Yes, I understand that as time progresses, things change, parents have to work. But at the same time, do kids who are in kindergarten really have an understanding? Number one. Number two, and what has caused the trend to just become so much more accessible to these children?
I think some of it has to do with parents working and not being able to, if the child has to walk, a young child has to walk with a couple other people by themselves, like in a group, 2 or 3 smaller kids walking to the school or walking to the bus stop, the parent feels that, hey, let me give them a device, a mobile device, so that in the event of an emergency, which is a great idea, in the event of emergency, let's give them a device so that they can call 911, they can call me, whatever the case may be. And that whole idea and that whole concept is a great idea. However, the bad guys look at it as, now I have another target or
Opportunity.
Right. And the kids look at it too as, and unfortunately, something like that where, let's just say a kindergartner or first graders walking to school with a group of others same age, and parent gives one of them a device. The other thing we're finding is they're not just giving them like for an example, a flip phone where they just need a call, make phone calls. That's it. They're giving them the latest and greatest iPhone or Android, and they have all these access to the internet and all these access to apps. So while they're there, they're playing their video games, and while they're playing video games, the bad guys are targeting them, or the bad guys are finding different ways to target them, because instead of choosing a different device, let's say for them just to make phone calls in case of an emergency, they have total and complete access to the internet. And then those small periods of time when they're not being supervised by an adult could lead to, the predator trying to communicate with them.
So, Detective, have you found that, the reason why parents don't provide them with flip phones instead of, or, provide them with an actual iPhone or a smartphone instead of a flip phone, is it because of more access to certain things, or is it because it's what is readily available to them, or do they not know that there are other alternatives for their children to communicate with them? So what have you received as feedback if you have asked that question, or when you have asked that question?
Good question.
So some of it is the lack of knowledge that there is a lesser, I guess you can call a lesser intrusive device like a flip phone or a phone that just makes phone calls. The other thing is the opportunity, the opportunity to get the device. So, most, if not everybody, has some type of cellular device at this point, the way technology is, and you have a family plan, and for free, you can get the latest and greatest iPhone, and all you have to do is pay $20 a month. Well, to the parent, that's not going to know any better or understand it. Well, free sounds really good to me. I'll just get the latest and greatest and give that to the child. Or I'll upgrade my phone, which was only a year old or 6 months old. I'll get the latest and greatest, and then I'll give them the phone I had, which is still an internet phone or internet-based, phone that can be accessing the internet. So, it's I think opportunity sometimes, and also, lack of knowledge at times, and just it's opportunity really. The opportunity to but get that free phone from one of the major carriers, and then just pay the $10 a month or $20 a month for the service.
Right.
It makes sense logistically, without thinking about what Pandora's box is gonna open at that point.
This amount of competition between kids and even parents to parents, that they felt that sometimes the kids had the more expensive cell phone as a, competing with the Joneses type thing.
In high school, yeah, not so much sometimes in middle school, but mainly in high school, but not nearly as much in elementary school. You don't really have that. I think they're just thankful for having it and the ability to play Roblox or whatever other game they're playing at the time. And it's a little different with the younger kids.
Okay, Harlot, you had a question?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, Detective, and thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it, and I think that all parents will too. I have a question about what platform do you think that it's most used to target these kids? It's more on social media, it's more on video gaming, is there a specific video games or a specific app that they might have in their phone or the kids might be using that make them more vulnerable?
I wish I could give you specific apps, but unfortunately, there really isn't. I mean, any app or any video game that has a function involving chatting is going to be, it could be an issue. Some of the major ones that we deal with are, Snapchat, Instagram, those are like some of the major ones. Discord. There are, those are some of the major ones that we deal with, but not to say that everything on there is bad. It's just, those are just some of the ones, but they all have a form of a chat function within it somehow. Same thing with the video games. Roblox is a popular game with young kids, and inside the video game Roblox, there's a function to communicate. And inside there, we've had cases where the bad guy goes on and communicates with a child, and the child thinks that they're communicating with another kid their age, and it's really the adult bad guy that they're talking with. So it's really anywhere that there's a possibility of chatting going on. That's where the issue could arise.
I have to tell you, it just seems to me that there could be just a tremendous amount of adults on these sites where they know for sure they are kids of whatever age, starting young kindergarten, let's just say, because they have the phones, all the way up to high school. But the fact is, you can't catch them until they're reported or somebody complains. How is it that you find out that they're there? Does something have to happen, or are you following these bad guys and tracking them, by the way they're logging in?
No, so usually it requires the parents reporting or somebody reporting to us that there's something going on, or we'll get reports from schools because the child's behavior has taken a complete 180 and diminished, or they're not out of control, but they're out of control in the sense of their behavior's completely changed because they're acting out because of the stress that they're under, because they don't know how to deal with that stress. And so because of that, instead of telling somebody about it, they start to act a different way. Or we'll get the kid that reports it to the parents, to the school, to somebody, and then we'll get it that way. So they do have, so most of the major internet service providers like, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all of them, they do have monitoring themselves. So if they do see something, they tend to report it to law enforcement. So there is that mechanism also of reporting, but majority of it's usually through a parent or somebody finding it and reporting it to law enforcement.
Well, that's great that those platforms have self-reporting, I should, for lack of a better term. How often is that used as opposed to how often you get a report from a parent or a child complaining?
So there's a federal law that states that every internet service provider is required by federal law to report child exploitation and child pornography and human trafficking to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia. So when they go through these reports, or when they go through these accounts, or they get flagged because somebody reports it to the internet service provider that, hey, this is going on, they're required to report that to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and which in turn creates a report and sends it to law enforcement for them to investigate. So I would say the majority of our, well, at least for me, I should say, I can't speak for everybody, but the majority of my cases come in through that way now. It used to be the other way around, where the majority of the cases came in from the road, where parents were reporting the cases to us. But nowadays, it seems to be more of the reports from the internet service providers.
Well, that's great to hear, because my first thought was, okay, so you're relying on these people, or whether it be an algorithm or what have you, to catch it. And then, I don't know, just that trust level, it kind of scared me. But now you're saying you're actually getting more numbers that way, which it makes me very happy to hear. Not
I
for the
think
reason
that has to
that
do,
they're actually reporting.
and I think that has to do with, well, unfortunately, some of that has to do, I think, with the pandemic, because a lot more people were online as opposed to being in person. So I think that caused a major uptick in our case, or at least in my caseload. So I think we saw a lot more activity in the last couple of years because of that.
So now, understanding that, the information gets to you after the fact, for the most part. So when a parent is, trying to be involved in the child's environment, what he or she is doing, so what are certain identifiers that the parents can be in the lookout? Especially if it's a new parent. I, for example, have two young boys, ages from 5 to 8, and they're starting to play certain games. And of course, we do have limited time for play, and we have the parental control and so on and so forth. They don't have access to our phones. They don't have phones, obviously, because they're too little, at least for us, and they have no need. However, they are aware of the phones and technology and how phones work and so on and so forth. So for those kids who are already in that level of using technology for communication purposes, social media, those different platforms, for parents who are, in that level of probably uncertainty or what to look for in these predators, are there certain traits or certain characteristics, behavioral characteristics that you can see from the actual predator or the person who's on the other side of the game that parents should be in the lookout for?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is that, like when it comes to social media apps, like your Instagram, Snapchat, your most common ones that they're using, you should be able to go down their friends list with the child and say, okay, who's this? And that child should be able to say, for example, that's, you know, Joey in my fourth period class, or that's Johnny around the neighborhood, or that's Susie and she's here. You know, they should be able to go through that. If you get to one and they're like, I don't know who it is, they send me a friend request and I said, okay, that's a red flag. Because if you don't know who it is, they need to be deleted off of the account as quickly as possible and removed and banned and blocked from their account, because then they have access to the child. As long as they have access to the child, not to say they will be, but could be potentially victimized at that point. So that's one thing to look through, and that's one thing to go through with the children. I tend to do that when I do the child presentations, and I get a child that's willing to participate with me.
Right, right.
But not always are they. But you know, I'll sit there and I'll look at their Instagram account, and I'll say, and I'm not looking at it for any reason other than to help them. And I'll look at it and I'll say, there's no way in this world that you know 2,000 people. And you have 2,000 followers. I can't imagine you being that popular, and maybe you are, but we'll have that discussion, and I'll be like, 2,000 followers. There's just no way. And we'll go through the list, and we won't spend long, but they'll be, who's this? I don't know. They just sent me a friend request. They wanted to follow me. Okay, great. Well, delete. So, and that's something that parents can do, and keep an eye out for. When it comes to like the video games or the online games that they play, in some games you can set, you can disable the chats for the games, but you know, the kid's going to complain that they can't communicate with their friends about the game as they're playing it, you know, things like that. So, you know, like I said before, the easiest way is to monitor what they're doing. So each night, at the end of the night, go through the device, and you have to just stress to them the importance of communicating with you all as the parent to provide that information when somebody reaches out to them, regardless. And another way to do it, which we try to stress to the parents, is don't treat it as a negative, treat it as a positive, in the sense that they're coming forward to you. You know, if they're doing something wrong, let's say you've told them 100 times you can't play Roblox, and all of a sudden they found a way to play it, and some bad guy starts talking to them, don't take the negative of they disobeyed you and they're playing Roblox. Treat it as a positive, with the positive reinforcement of, okay, yeah, you shouldn't have been playing it. However, I'm really grateful that you came forward with this information, and make it to where they understand that they're the victim, if you want to call it that. Not so much, hey, you're grounded for life because you violated our rules of the house and went on Roblox. You know, so there's ways of going around that to deal with that situation. So
that positive reinforcement, I think that's key. Also, that's a really good pointer to highlight for sure. You mentioned something that really caught my attention. You said, and maybe the numbers were exaggerated, and I understand for the purposes of conversation, but I have also seen, you know, that trend of having X amount of followers, which is really important for the popularity of of whomever is on social media, right? And I do have, you know, friends who have teenage kids, and it's about the popularity, and without having any regard of who they accept or who they allow, or having that public type of profile, right? Having access to everybody. Now, this is more of a comment than a question, or it can lead into a question anyway. But I have seen that there is really a lot more of a regard to show the numbers of followers that you have, as opposed to the true people who know you and, you know, who are your true friends. Now here's the question that, you know, can follow from this is, have you seen an increase now in terms of ages of children who have access to phone and access to social media? Maybe you can provide an age range, and, you know, in comparison to other years, and in comparison to, I guess, you know, maybe different populations of, just accessibility of social media and how that has affected the psychology of the kids as well, in a sense of, popularity more than anything, just allowing access to people to your profile just to have those numbers.
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll see it's more of the middle school and high schoolers that are like that. And we'll see that as a popularity thing. They're trying to be popular, or they're accepting, like I said, they're accepting friend requests. They're just accepting quick ads for friends on Snapchat. And it's just to see how many people they can follow and who these people are. So, and then once they realize that they're I don't want to say nobodies, but they're not somebody, not a friend, not somebody they don't associate with, they, instead of getting rid of them, they usually just leave them there. A lot of times too, kids will, if the child, meaning like the middle school or high schooler, sets up their account as opposed to the parent, the kid will set up their account in a public mode where everybody can see it, as opposed to private where it's limited into who can see their profiles. So when it comes to the younger kids, like elementary school age kids, we tend to find that that's the parents setting up the accounts with them.
Okay.
And that's,
So there is somewhat of a control still within the younger population.
yeah, it's more of the control. Yes, I would say. I would think more of the monitoring is probably what's the issue down with the younger children.
Yeah, because even if you have it on private, if you get a friend request and you're still trying to increase your numbers, the people who are friends with you can see your numbers. So it's private, but not necessarily private. Because if you're trying to rack up your numbers because that makes you feel better about yourself. If someone sends you a request, you can still accept it. They might not be able to see all your photos and everything until they're actually a friend or a follower, but nonetheless, they can still contact you and at least put that request in. And the concern is if it's about the numbers, these kids are going to accept that person just because.
Right. Or they're even if they're not going for the numbers, they're just going to say, oh, somebody wants to be my friend, so therefore I'm going to accept it, not looking at who it can be.
And knowing, and this is something, and I know I went through this with my daughter when she was very, very, very young, in elementary school. Just because their profile has a picture of a child or they have pictures that are of similar interest to their age group does not mean that that's actually another child. And that's, I think, where the younger kids just will get very, very confused by that.
Correct.
Because they don't set up their profile to be the bad guy. They set up their profile to be disguised. Right.
They'll set up their profile as another kid, being that they're a bad guy. And so therefore they'll do that. And the child will be distracted and think that it's another child when it's really the bad guy.
So from the side of the kid, detective, what should they look for, or what would be the red flags for the kids to identify when they encounter one of these bad guys?
I mean, clearly one of the things is that they don't know who the person is. If you don't know, like I said, if you can't say that this person is, in my school, in my neighborhood, a close family friend of a friend, you can't put a name and a face together with this person, then there's no reason to have them as a friend on your account at all. That would be the easiest way to prevent that from happening, because in theory, what should happen is the only people on the account should be people that they know and people that they trust. And that should help eliminate that situation. The other thing too is, look at the accounts and see what the account is. If there's an account that was just created a day ago and has no followers and no friends, and they're trying to get you as a friend, that would be a red flag too, because somebody just created that account the other day, and why? And maybe it is a younger person that just created their own account, but
You don't want to risk that. You don't want to take that risk
Correct.
at all.
I mean, it could be a fraud account anyways to begin with, but those are just some of the things to look for. But the biggest thing would be to make sure that you know the person that is sending you the request. And if you don't, then don't accept it. There's no reason to even give them an opportunity to be on your account at that point. And if they, listen, if it's somebody that really, really is like your friend or wants to be your friend or something, and they really want to become, part of your Instagram account or whatever, or Snapchat, they'll find a way to send you a message somehow, whether it be through a direct message, through a text message, through something, to say, hey, by the way, I sent you a friend request the other day and you didn't respond, or you blocked me or something. And you'll be like, oh, okay, now I know who it is and now I can accept it. So, that would be another way for them to kind of like a two-factor authentication that says that, hey, I know who this person is.
So it sounds to me like these kids, I mean, when a child is more reluctant to accept, it's because the child is or has been educated by a family member or an adult. So what would be the tools, or what would be a good approach for parents to start to initiate the conversation, without causing such trauma or fear to the child? Because I mean, I don't think that if I have a conversation with my 5-year-old as I would have with my 8-year-old, he'll probably get it and understand it, but not to the fullest. It's just like saying no stranger danger. Somebody comes up to you and tries to talk to you, you run away, you go the other way, you do whatever you need to do to run. So what would you recommend, or what would be a good way to initiate that conversation and create awareness to these kids or to younger kids about the dangers of cyberspace, of what's behind, that little box and that little screen that seems to be very innocent initially, but in fact, there's a lot of darkness behind it.
I think you brought up the point of stranger danger. I think that's the same way. I think you can apply that to the internet too. You can tell them, listen, stay away from those people that you don't know, that you're not sure about. It's kind of, even as adults, it's kind of one of those things, you get those emails that says, hey, just fill out this form and you've won the $1 million sweepstakes, and
you're an instant millionaire, right?
Right. And you're like, it's gotta be too good to be true. And that's what I tell them. I tell the kids in the presentation, I'm like, if this just sounds really too good to be true, then it probably is. And you probably should avoid it. That's the way to look at it too, from that perspective, from a child's perspective too, and explain to them, listen, if this just doesn't sound right, or just doesn't sound, it sounds like it's too good to be true, even though this person's offering you $1 million just to be their friend, there's something wrong with that picture, and a kid's not going to get that offer. They're going to get an offer of, we've had kids that, hey, I'll get you the latest and greatest iPhone if you just be my friend. And the child's like, oh, that sounds great. All I got to do is be as their friend. And they're not thinking of oh yeah, that does sound too good to be true. They're thinking of, I'm getting the latest and greatest iPhone and I'm going to be the superstar now. And so they need to be explained to them without putting fear into them. Like, if it's too good to be true, then it's, probably not something you should be doing, or at least questioning it. And with the parents or a guardian to say, hey, I got this request, but something just, at least check it out with the parent to make sure is this right? Does this make sense? And see what they say, So I would suggest that.
I have a question for you. When you were saying, as technology grows and expands and gets, so do the amount of
some
bad guys out there grows and expands. Now that there's a whole new label now on the internet known as influencer, and that is really about numbers. And some of the influencers, they make great money. I'm not saying necessarily elementary school, but there are some that are much younger. And now you have a programmer, you become an influencer, which is, something that these kids are very proud to say that they are, which leads to, like I said, greater numbers. How it's kind of like a double-edged sword. How do you combat that?
Again, at their age, yes, they may want to become an influencer, but the parent has to, I think the parent has to outweigh them attempting to have a job, I guess you could say, as an influencer versus the risk and safety of them potentially being in danger because of their age, immaturity, and not making the right choices. So I think the parent needs to, try to stress to them the importance of probably waiting until they're older and can make those wiser decisions instead of the 13-year-old trying to be the social influencer and not making those right choices and going down that wrong rabbit hole that's going to lead them into trouble. So I think that's something the parent needs to have a conversation like, hey, I hate to say this, not meaning in a negative way, but go get a real job. Go to a grocery store, go to, a park or something and get a job like that, as opposed to trying to do something online like that may get you into not trouble in a bad way criminally, trouble in the sense of you being victimized.
Yeah, there was just a recent story in the news of a girl in high school. She was an influencer through, I believe it was posting her dance videos. And there was someone that followed her and who was desperately trying to get in touch with her or near her. And I'll link up the article for everybody. And he eventually made his way to her house and broke in through the door with a gun. So it does happen.
Yes, it does not surprise me. Again, it sounds too good to be true, like I'm really going to have all these followers and all these people. And I don't know that not me, but I as the influencer can really make that difference with all those people without getting into some type of trouble or putting myself in a position to be in trouble.
High risk.
Yes. High risk and low reward.
Yeah,
Arlette, go ahead.
I was gonna ask the detective if, I know he gave the example of they can offer a phone to the child, or is there any other way? I'm sure they are, but if you can give us some other examples of different ways that kids can get enticed and on how these bad guys actually attract these kids once they get into a conversation with them, and how the whole process develop that they end up being either like sexual abuse or maybe sometimes like injured or killed or sexual assaulted. What are the tools that they use?
The tools that they use are mainly just the chatting functions, the different ways of chatting with them, whether it's through the video games that they play online, the apps that are video games that they can chat through, or the social media accounts. But you're also dealing, like with middle and high school kids, you're dealing with hormones too that you're going to have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And lately there's been quite a few cases where these kids, teenagers, they're online and they see this beautiful girl online, and this boy sees this beautiful girl, and immediately they start exchanging, what they believe to be exchanging pictures, and sexually explicit pictures. And then what happens is the girl's not really the girl that's in that picture, and now they're using those sexually explicit pictures of the teenager to extort them for money in exchange for not publicly humiliating them or publicly embarrassing them, or sending those pictures to their family and friends and everybody in their school and things. Those are the latest things, the trend that go on. And some of those people actually, some of the victims actually pay the person, and It does go away temporarily, but that doesn't mean it's not going to come back. Those people have your pictures, you know, your sexually explicit pictures. And one of the things I tell the kids in the presentations that I do with the kids is, and the parents too, I'm like, you know, you take a sexually explicit picture of yourself and you send it to somebody, there's no getting it back. Once you hit send, there's no getting it back. So even in a situation where it's, you know, two 15-year-olds and, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend, and they exchange pictures of themselves, inappropriate pictures, it's great if they make it through high school and on into college and then get married, but that's doesn't really happen that often. And so, you know, there's breakups, and with breakups, the pictures don't, it's not part of the breakup. The pictures stay where they stay. And if one gets mad at the other, and then, you know, next thing you know is those pictures are being sent across the school or sent across family members and friends, and look at what I've got. And look at how they've scorned me or pissed me off. And so now you have that to deal with. When you clearly thought you were sending it to somebody, whether it was a beautiful girl that you saw online or a significant other at the time, it came back to bite you in the long run, you know. So I tell the kids that if you don't want the entire world to see the picture, don't put it out there and don't send it to anybody. So if you're fine with the entire world seeing this picture of you, or this picture that you're about to send, then go for it. But if you're not, which most of them aren't, then don't send it. There's no reason to send it to whoever. That beautiful girl online, or that handsome guy online, or the girl or the guy that you're dating for the last, you know, 2 weeks that you're steady and you're madly in love with and 15 years old, and there's going to be how many more in between then and graduation, you know? So just those are things that we tend to see lately as trends, more of the, what we call, so it's a form of extortion, but it's called a sextortion, where they're using sexually explicit pictures to extort people for money and other things.
When you're talking about when they're asking for photos, and it just seems to me that the kids should also, the younger ones at least, because there's a lot of perverts out there that'll be fine with pictures of you in your bikini or, you know, in your, you know, underwear or what have you. It's not, you could be dressed and it's still inappropriate. So the kids need to know, and even the teenagers, you know, that's still, don't send it. Don't send it to, definitely not to someone that you do not know. It doesn't have to always just be, you know, undressed or in a sexual position. Just don't send photos to anybody of any kind.
Correct.
Because that's where it starts.
Yes. The other thing too is putting too much personal information out there on their profiles. Where you go to school, there should never be, especially the younger kids, the elementary school kids, and parents like to do this too. There should never be a picture online somewhere where your child's in a school uniform and I can make out the school logo. I'm the cop, I'm fine with that being me, but you have to look at it from my perspective. Now the bad guy sees it. Not to say this is going to happen, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it's more of a preventative thing. But if I'm the bad guy and I really want to get to that child, all I got to do is take that image or take that word of the name of the school and put it into our friend Google, and it'll tell me exactly where to go. And it'll tell me exactly where that child is, and voila, then I can go find the child. So we strongly encourage parents not to post pictures of their children with their school uniforms or logos on, so that anybody can figure out where they're at.
Is there also, I know if you're texting a photo, I'm not sure if you actually look at the information, if you're taking it off of the internet or a social media platform, but you can look up the information on a photo, and it will, the information on the photo can tell you exactly where and what time it was taken.
Yeah, so that's called metadata. Metadata within a picture is can be crucial. What I will tell you is that majority, if not all of the internet service providers strip the metadata when you post something on there. So if I post a picture on my Instagram page today and you take it off of there, you will not be able to get the metadata out of there. That's something that even as law enforcement, we have to get a court order to get.
Okay. But if a child is asked to send a photo to somebody, there's a really good chance all that metadata is going to be on.
Correct. Yeah. If it's a text message or email or something along those lines, more than likely the metadata is still going to be there in the picture. And yes, can provide them with crucial information to find that person based on that photo.
Yeah, it's almost like a Find My iPhone. It can tell you a lot of details. So if anybody's paying attention to this, look at the information on your photos. It's shocking what is available.
Yes, very.
Yeah, it'll show you the geospace, you know, and your geographical location. It'll pretty much show everything.
Yeah, where the picture was taken, and you know, if you took a selfie inside the house and you texted it to somebody, more than likely the geolocation of the house is going to be in that picture and passed on.
That's
Yeah.
so scary. Go ahead.
Yeah, now that we're talking about the social media platforms and so on, to me, it's a complete misconception. Now, Detective, you can definitely please correct me and please, you know, enlighten all of us on this. When I hear the young crowd say, "Oh yeah, I'm just doing a Snapchat," of explicit, you know, just very provocative poses and so on. And, you know, the question of, aren't you scared? Oh no, the picture just goes away. Does it go away is the main question in my eyes. Those things never go away. They stay there. They're embedded for life. You know, you can extract it somehow, some way. And it's difficult for the kids to really comprehend that. You know, please enlighten us on that. And is it true or is it completely false?
So with Snapchat, the belief is that after that little circle goes around, it's gone and done. Don't forget, you know, in the time of that little circle, you can take a screenshot of it and preserve it. And not you, but somebody else can. Yes, you will get notified of it, but by then it's too late. The other thing that can happen without you getting notified is the other party can have a phone, take a secondary device, another phone or a tablet or something, take a picture of the phone with the sexually explicit picture or whatever the picture is, and you won't get the notification that a picture was taken, and so now it's preserved again. So that's one way that we see that happens. There are screen recordings that can be done without the user being notified of it. So there are ways. And then, you know, for a law enforcement end of it, you know, some of the kids believe that these images and videos are gone from there, and after serving the company with proper legal process, we've been able to get those pictures and videos from the company because they still have them. So where they believe that they're gone, they're not necessarily gone. And this goes back to what I said before with them. You know, I try to tell them, if you don't want the entire world to see it, then there's no reason to post it at all. So if that's the case, then it shouldn't be posted, shared. Even if you think it's going to disappear, it's not going to disappear. It's still a possibility. You still have to worry about that possibility of it coming up again, whether it be now or in 15 years when you go to apply for that nice corporate job and they Google your name and up pop these photos from Google, and you're like, that was 15 years ago. What the heck happened to that? And you're
Right.
like, and you're sitting there kicking yourself in the butt, not realizing that mistake you did 15 years ago when you were back in middle or high school is now coming back to bite you in the butt.
The one thing also you talked about when we had our conversation, Detective, was you mentioned Airdrop and VPN. I was very surprised at that. Can you explain that?
Yes. So when it comes to the Airdrop's only with Apple devices. So one of the issues that we've had with that is kids will leave their airdrop on to everyone. And so as the child's sitting there in a classroom, all of a sudden somebody walks by the classroom and takes something, whether it's a sexually explicit picture, it could be a meme, it could be a school thread, it could be something, and just airdrops it to the entire classroom. And those that have it set to everyone will get that picture. And just think of it from the teacher's perspective of, I'm in a classroom with whatever, 30, 40 kids, and all of a sudden, they're not supposed to be using their phones in class, but we all know that that doesn't happen. So all of a sudden, 30 out of the 30 or 40 kids, three-quarters of them erupt in laughter or start freaking out because of what they just read on their device because they got airdropped something. And by the time that happens, the person that did it's gone. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out who it is. And a lot of times it's not easy to do. It's not easy to figure out who these people are that, if they do it in the right spot where there's no video surveillance, then sometimes it's hard to figure that out. So that's an issue. We strongly recommend the parents that they have number one, they should have their airdrop set to off. And anytime they need it, they can turn it on and then turn it back off. Or another way of doing it is having it set to contacts only so that they're only getting airdrops from contacts that are stored in their phone that they know are so-and-so. So that's one way to prevent it from occurring, is you're not just allowing anybody to send you something. You're specifically narrowing it down to either contacts only or nobody at all unless you turn it on. As far as VPNs, with children, there's really no reason for them to have a VPN. We use VPNs here at the police department simply for the fact that our network is secured as it should be. We have sensitive information that we don't want out there, and that's what the VPN does. The VPN helps protect the network. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. And what'll happen is the child will connect to the Wi-Fi at school because they're allowed to, and the school allows that. However, what they don't like is the fact that the school blocks certain sites and certain apps from them being able to use them. So they will block Snapchat, they'll block Instagram, they'll block the games that they don't want them to play from being able to be accessed during school hours. And what the child will do is the child will install a VPN on their phone, and then they will access the VPN. And then from the VPN, then they will go access Snapchat or Instagram or whatever the case may be, simply because the VPN causes them to go around the filters that are set in place for the school or for the place where they're at. And then this same thing can happen at home too. You as a parent can place filters on your internet. The child's going to place a VPN on their device. They can be placed on a phone, it can be placed on a tablet, computer, and they're going to do this to bypass those filters. So
how easy to do is that? I mean, it seems really complex as you're explaining it to us. I find it even difficult for me to go ahead and start downloading a VPN and doing all of that. I mean, how easy is it for these kids to do?
Most of the times, that's the problem is, so most of the times they'll go to YouTube and they'll watch a 2-second video or a 30-second video on YouTube, and they'll be like, okay, go to this site, press this button, and you're done. Installing a VPN is some of them are free, especially with an iPhone. Some of them have them built in already.
Wow. So
it's not that hard to install. Sometimes it's just a click of a button and you're done.
How do you check them?
So how can parents find out if their kid has that on their phone?
Go into their settings.
We look for on the settings.
Go into their settings. In an iPhone and in an Android, it's in the settings, and it's usually somewhere around their Wi-Fi settings. So I know on the iPhone, it's like 1 or 2 underneath the Wi-Fi setting where it gives you the option of having a VPN enabled or not. And I think the same thing is in somewhere around the Wi-Fi settings on an Android. there should be a question about a VPN, whether you want it turned on or not. Like I said, the iPhone, I think, comes with one free already. There are tons of free ones out there that kids can just connect to really, really quickly. There are paid ones. The free ones, it's like anything else. You get what you get. It's free. So it's not the greatest, but it works for them at the moment. And then the paid ones are, you have your range of paid ones. And if they choose to pay the $2 a month for that service, then the child can have a better service and better VPN service to bypass the filters. But the biggest thing for the parents is to look and ask, why is it set up? Why is it on? Why do you even have it? Because there shouldn't be a reason. And the excuse is going to be, well, I use it because the internet at the school sucks. Well, what do you need the internet on your phone for? You should have laptops. You should have computers at your school if you need it. And if the internet doesn't really work that well at school, then wait till you get home. What is it that my question would be, what is it that you need that moment while you're in school that you need to get on the internet for, that the teacher can't do or go over with you?
It's such great advice. It's such an eye opener to so many people that, when you don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. And I knew what a VPN was. I never even thought the misuse of one.
Yes. And that's usually what we find out, is that they're trying to do it to bypass a filter of some type and continue. And for some kids, it's more of a distraction, because then you start to wonder, okay, well, why is your kid failing this class? Your kid's failing the class because they're sitting there on Snapchat all class and not paying attention, or they're not doing their work, or, there may be other reasons, but this could be one of the things that you can look at as to causing the problem.
You also mentioned, these people, we refer to them as bad guys. Are the numbers low on the amount of women who try to lure kids?
Yes. We don't see women that often. And when we do, it is rare. It is very low. Not to say that's not possible. It is very possible. But the numbers are low for that. We don't typically see women as offenders. But that's not to say that we don't get them. And if you see something on the child's device that maybe a woman does, not to put your guard down because of that. It's not as common as the male predator.
Okay. Now, these bad guys, when they're talking to and I say kids, and I'm going to put the whole range, elementary to high school. When they're talking to them, is there basically certain, like, how long does it take? Their goal is to, or I'd imagine most of them, their goal is to eventually meet this child. So do they feel them out for a child that seems to be unhappy or less fortunate or sad in some way? Do they look for the easy target? Do they talk to them for a week, a month, whatever it takes? How do they actually get them to where they're truly in harm's way?
That's hard to say. Some victims are in bad situations, so the bad guy promises them the world and puts them in promises to put them in a better situation, which clearly entices them to want to do things. Some of them are in a really good situation and just look for the fact that I could have better, or they want attention. And they're not getting the attention from where they're at now, and this person's willing to provide the attention. So each one of them vary from, case to case. Usually it's the child seeking attention, or the child's in a bad situation, and this person's promising them the world, and which seems like a much better situation than they're in now. And so unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case when they get to that situation, but that's what they're promised ahead of time.
Oh gosh, Harlot, did I hear you had a question?
I was gonna ask the detective if, like, how often law enforcement people actually visit schools or community centers at different cities to talk to the kids and explain them how this happened, what could happen, what are the consequences, and or give them like actually real cases, or talk to them about real cases to advise them and to educate them. Is there any campaign that is going on? Is there something that are we doing here in Florida?
So I meet with our school resource officers every year and explain to them that the ability to have the presentations are there. They just have to talk to their school and find out whether they want it or not. I just did a high school presentation last week for parents at a high school nearby, and the principal had asked me to come out, and it's an annual thing with the principal. Every year I go out and I do the same, not the same, but the same get together that they have at the school. He invites me to come do the presentation for that. So it really just depends on the principal. A lot of times during the school year, you know, they're struggling to, the school that is struggling that they have to make all these standards. They have to get through all these standards. They have to get through all these tests. They have to get through all this different stuff. And so there really isn't a lot of time for these types of presentations. However, some of them do make these presentations available after school parent conferences, or, you know, parent assemblies or student assemblies when they have downtime, and they make them available. It's really just on a school by school basis on what they want to provide. I have done them for other organizations like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, you know, private schools, things like that, that have asked for those types of presentations. So that's been done too. So it's not just a school thing. It's, you know, other organizations ask for it also and can request it.
And to tag on that, are there any other resources that can be, you know, looked at by anyone on the internet, any parent that wants more information? Is there any website that you would recommend?
Yeah,
or any organization that you'd recommend?
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has a ton of information on their website, which is the NCMEC.org, and they have a ton of information on there for parents, for children. They can, you know, if a parent sees something online as far as the child exploitation goes, they can even make a report online and it'll get forwarded to law enforcement. So, I mean, there's different, they've got so many things on there that they offer. They offer counseling services for a child that's a victim. They offer a ton of stuff on their website, and I would strongly recommend that.
Anybody listening, so you know, all of the links and the places for reporting or resources for presentations will be below us in the show notes, below the video here. So I'll make sure everybody has that link. So if in the unfortunate reason you have to actually use it, it will be available to you. One thing I was reading about, Detective, was this whole metaverse world, this virtual world where a lot of kids are in there, and there's a ton of just horrible people in there doing virtual, you know, whether it be bullying all the way to sexual assaults. How are you combating that?
Well, we really haven't seen too many of those lately, which is good. But I would venture to say that once we get those cases, we're going to attack them just like we would any other case. We're going to try to see where the source is coming from and try to go from there as far as identifying suspects from that end. Forensically, what we can find through devices and things like that to try to figure out who we're dealing with. But, you know, most of the times when somebody does enter into something, a game, a platform of some type, there is some type of registration at some point. Whether it's accurate or not, there is some type of registration that has to be done. And so hopefully that helps us and points us in the right direction when it comes to that.
When
So
you talk about registration really quickly, when you say registration, are you referring to registering as an avatar, or are you looking at registration as the actual device that is being registered through, like a computer, a cell phone, or so on and so forth? What do you mean by registration?
A little bit of both. So when you sign up for an app, you have to provide, you're supposed to provide information about who you are. Not everybody provides accurate information, but somebody may screw up and put something in there and put the rest of it as false, and something is accurate. We are able to track it from there. So that part of it is something that we look at. And then also when registering a device, excuse me, there's information that's provided to the carrier and to the companies for us to be able to gather that information to try to identify who these people are.
So it wouldn't matter if you're registering through a metaverse, now with this entire new world that has been created. It seems like there are very, I guess, little parameters or restrictions when it comes to this. Does it vary because it is a metaverse, or it's still the same generic type of processes that you would when you're registering for a platform?
I believe that they're somewhat the same. There's should be something now, not all the time, where we're going to be able to figure out who the people are. But there's usually something, and in most cases, there's something that takes us back to another spot for us to look at, and another spot gives us something to try to identify somebody with. And it may not even be to identify somebody, it may be identifying a location, and then it's a matter of figuring out who at the location is the one doing it, which is better than nothing. At least it points us in the right direction. But usually, for the most part, there's something that's pointing us in a direction, either towards a person or towards a location, that helps to lead us to the suspect or the bad guy that we're looking for.
it's like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes, it sounds like.
Yes, it is.
I have a quick question regarding the metaverse, and I know everything is still very fresh, but how much do you know, Detective, about this metaverse and how this can... I've heard a couple of instances where there has been some sort of sexual abuse or sexual assault within the metaverse among certain avatars. I mean, it's a lingo that for me, it's very unfamiliar, so it doesn't come out naturally. But at any rate, legally speaking, how does that now translate into our world, understanding that the metaverse is a fictitious type of environment where, in our real world, if there's, some sort of sexual abuse, sexual assault, or aggravated assault going on, there's going to be legal repercussions. So now, how does that translate into the metaverse? Would it be the same? I mean, it's something so new that I don't know if there has been any legal repercussions when dealing with these type of issues.
Yeah, I don't think we've come to that part yet. I think that if it doesn't arise to anything that we have as a crime already, that it would have to be addressed. Because there's certain elements you have to meet within the crimes that we have now when you're dealing with real people. So if you don't have that, or even in the computer world, there's still elements of crimes that you have to meet in order to get in order to define the crime itself. So with the metaverse, if you're not able to meet that with those types of statutes and laws that we have in place, then that might be something that, if continued and continues to be an issue where people are being victimized, then that may be something that, you know, legislators are going to have to look at as far as adopting new laws to help deal with that.
It's so wild. I mean, we are living in wild times. It blows my mind.
Yeah. And Detective, you know firsthand just how evil, you know, the world can be to these kids. Give us an example if you have one, just to make it real so people understand this does happen. This isn't just a presentation to, you know, to avoid it from happening. Be a good parent. It sounds like everything starts with the parenting, with the monitoring and talking to your children and keeping them safe. But as we know, it doesn't always work out that way. And that's why we have people and detectives and organizations that you're affiliated with and what you do, because it does happen.
Yeah, so a case that I use in my presentations to the children, or the kids, to get them to understand the severity of this was a case that I had where I was online acting as a child, and the person was trying to entice me, thinking I was a child, to meet them to have sex. So we arranged for the meeting, and we met, I should say, he met the SWAT team as they took him into custody. But that was one of the ones that kind of like freaked me out a little bit, because after they had him in custody and we're going through the car, there was a loaded handgun in the car, in the center console. And there was it was an SUV, so in the back part of the car was a shovel, duct tape, and a tarp. His excuse was he was a survivalist, and I wasn't buying that. Clearly, his ideas of having sex with a child was going to happen, and then my belief was that he just wasn't going to leave the child as a witness. So, or if the child acted up, he was going to take care of the child. So that was definitely an experience to witness. Thankfully, that was me, that was the victim, not an actual child. So there are some pictures that I use in my presentation to the kids to say, hey, look, this is what came to meet me. And if they're going to come to meet me, they're going to definitely come to meet you. So I use that to kind of push the message out to them of, hey, don't think that this is not going to happen.
It happens all too often.
Yes.
Quick question. What are the charges, Detective, for enticing a child here in Florida?
So there's two ways. There's depending on what the charge, depending on what occurs in the chats. If there's sexually explicit pictures that are sent between the victim and the suspect, they could be charged with production, distribution of child pornography. There is the enticement of a minor, not only at the state level, but at the federal level. There is enticement. There is a production charge for having a child produce sexually explicit images or videos of them. So they do look at those. On the federal level, the minimum mandatories range between 10 and 15 years, and that's the minimum that they can get. So if some of them score higher, some of them, they can't go lower than that, but they score higher than that. So it really just depends on what, where they're being prosecuted and what they're being charged with.
Well, Detective, I just feel for you, because what you have to see and witness, and it's probably something that, most people hopefully never even have to experience, and you do it as your job. And that's incredibly commendable. And you're a great man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's more, like I said at the beginning, to help the children. So that's more of the goal and the reasoning behind it.
The children, and you're also helping the parents and the families in general. I mean, it is commendable, Detective, and thank you. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you
Yes,
for
thank
having
you
me. I
very much.
appreciate it.
Yes, again, Detective, thank you very much for helping us learn a lot more about the criminal side of the internet and technology. And hopefully we can just keep fighting our way through and save each child, one child at a time with people and teams like you. And thank you very, very much for being with us for part 1 of Exposed on Forensic Friday.
Thank you.